Rain hammered against the hospital parking lot in Atlanta, pouring down like an endless storm. Inside the pediatric wing, the lights buzzed faintly, blending with the sound of coughing children. Malik Carter wasn't supposed to be there. He had only come to check on a former employee who had been in a car accident. But one wrong turn down a long sterile corridor brought him face to face with a room that froze him in place. Behind the glass wall of room 3C, a woman sat on the edge of a narrow hospital bed, her back tense, her arms wrapped around a child tangled in tubes. And beside her, another small boy lay still with only the fragile rise and fall of his chest, proving he was alive. Malik's breath hitched as he moved closer, and when the woman turned, his world stopped. Ayanna Brooks. The woman who had vanished from his life 7 years ago. No note, no phone call, nothing but silence the night before Malik was forced into a marriage arranged to save his father's empire. He had searched, begged, lost countless nights trying to find her, but she had disappeared without a trace. And now, here she was, older, tired, but still her. And the children with her had his hazel brown eyes, the same eyes that had stared back at him in the mirror his whole life. Ayanna's face shifted the moment she saw him. Fear and disbelief cut through her expression, and guilt burned in her eyes. Malik's chest tightened, his hand hovering at the door before he finally stepped inside. The sound of the hinges felt like thunder. Ayanna turned sharply, holding the child tighter. Her voice trembled as she spoke his name, Malik. He stood there, his entire body shaking with 7 years of unanswered questions. Ayanna, he said, his voice raw. The beeping monitors and the smell of antiseptic filled the silence between them as Malik's gaze locked onto the children. He couldn't deny it, they looked like him. 7 years, he whispered, his words like fire. You disappeared without a word, and now, I find you here with them. Ayanna stepped in front of the bed, her body trembling but firm. You shouldn't be here, she said. Malik's jaw tightened as he stared at her. Who are they? He asked, his voice breaking under the weight of anger and disbelief. They're my sons, Ayanna answered, her voice shaking but steady enough to pierce through him. His chest burned as the truth hit him harder than any blow. Are they mine? He asked. Her silence said more than words, her lips trembling before she finally whispered, yes, they're yours. The ground shifted beneath Malik. 7 years of his life stolen. 2 children born in silence, raised without him, his children. Ayanna's voice cracked as she confessed, I was pregnant. You were being forced to marry someone else. I couldn't tell you. I didn't want to ruin your future. I didn't want to be your shame. Malik's heart slammed against his ribs, his voice sharp with pain. You thought I wouldn't fight for you? For them? Her eyes filled with tears as she shook her head. I couldn't take that risk. One of the boys stirred, his small body groaning weakly. Ayanna rushed to adjust the floor, her hands gentle, her voice soft as she soothed him. Malik couldn't look away. He stepped closer, his voice lowering. Their names. Her lips moved softly. Jordan and Yolan. Malik repeated the names, his throat tightening as if every syllable was a prayer. They were his sons, his blood, his everything. The door opened, and a doctor entered, glancing cautiously at Malik. Miss Brooks, we need to discuss Jordan's blood results. Ayanna straightened quickly and said firmly, it's okay. He's their father. The word ripped through Malik, heavy and undeniable. Father. The doctor's face grew serious. Jordan's body isn't responding to the treatment. We'll need to consider a stem cell transplant. Time is limited. Malik's world shook as the words settled in his chest. He turned to Ayanna, his voice breaking. You've been carrying this alone. Her eyes dropped to the floor, her voice low and pained. I've been working 3 jobs. We live in a 1-bedroom apartment. Most nights I sleep on the floor. I never wanted you to see me like this. Malik stepped forward, his hand brushing against his son's fragile arm. His voice grew steady, fueled by something unshakable. You will never do this alone again. They're my sons. I'm here now, and I'm not leaving. Ayanna turned her head away, fighting the emotions threatening To consume her. It's not that simple, she whispered. Malik's voice dropped lower, firm and resolute. Yes, it is. I lost you once, Ayana. I won't lose them too. Malik stood in the hospital room, his eyes fixed on Ayana and the two boys who had stolen the air from his lungs. 7 years ago she had vanished without a trace, and now he finally had his answer. But the truth cut deeper than he could have imagined. His sons had lived their entire lives without knowing him. His voice was low, heavy with anger and pain. You left me with nothing, Ayana. No explanation, no goodbye. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Her lips trembled as she clutched Jordan closer to her chest. I didn't have a choice. You were being forced into a marriage, Malik. Your father arranged it to save the company, and you didn't fight it. You didn't come for me. Malik's jaw tightened as the fire in his chest grew. You were gone before I could. I came to your apartment that morning, and you had vanished without a word. Ayana turned her face away, guilt flickering in her eyes as her voice dropped to a whisper. I was pregnant. I didn't want to ruin your life. I didn't want to be the reason your world collapsed. The words struck him like a blow to the chest. Malik's breath caught as he tried to steady himself. You were carrying my children. And you didn't tell me? You thought keeping them from me was protecting me. Her voice cracked under the weight of her confession. I thought if I stayed, I would become the scandal that destroyed you. I didn't want our babies to grow up being whispered about, judged for who their mother was. I thought disappearing was the only way to keep them safe. The room filled with silence, so thick it pressed down on them both. The boys stirred lightly, in their sleep, their soft breathing a reminder of everything that had been lost. Malik's eyes burned as he stepped closer, his voice breaking despite his effort to hold it together. I would have done anything for them, for you, do you understand that? I would have burned the world to protect what we had. Ayana's body shook as she tried to hold herself together, but the walls around her heart began to crack. I didn't believe you would, she whispered. I was terrified you'd try to take them, or worse, pretend they didn't exist. Malik's chest rose and fell heavily as he fought the storm of emotions surging inside him. He turned his eyes to the boys, Jordan pale and fragile under the weight of illness. Yalan resting quietly beside him, both unaware of the war raging between their parents. His voice softened as he asked their names again. Ayana blinked. Through her tears, Jordan and Yolan. Malik swallowed hard, repeating the names like he was trying to carve them into his soul. Jordan, Yolan, my sons. The doctor's words from earlier rang through his mind like a curse. Jordan's body wasn't responding to treatment. The boy needed a stem cell transplant, and time was running out. Malik felt the weight of years of absence crash down on him. He wasn't there when they were born, he wasn't there when they took their first steps, and now he had stumbled into their lives at the moment when one of them might not survive. He clenched his fists at his sides and whispered to himself, I won't lose them. Ayana looked at him, her eyes wet with exhaustion and fear. This isn't your responsibility, Malik. You didn't ask for this life. He turned to her, his gaze sharp and unshakable. The hell it isn't. They are my sons. You kept them from me, but that ends now. I don't care what it costs. I'm not walking away from them. Not ever. Ayana's defenses faltered, her voice breaking as she whispered, it's not that easy. Malik stepped closer until his presence filled the space around her, his voice deep and unwavering. Then I'll make it easy. You and I can argue about the past forever, but none of that matters, now. What matters is that Jordan needs us, Yolan needs us, and I'm not letting you carry this weight alone anymore. I lost you once, Ayana, but I refuse to lose them. The words hung between them, heavy with the weight of years of love, betrayal, fear, and hope. Ayana looked at him, torn between pushing him away and collapsing into his arms, her body trembling as her heart fought against the walls she had built. Malik's hand hovered near his son's small arm, the warmth of Jordan's skin beneath the hospital blanket pulling him in, binding him to a truth that could never be undone. In that moment, as machines beeped softly around them and the storm outside continued to pound against the hospital windows. Malik Carter knew his life had changed forever. He wasn't just a man who had lost the love of his life. He was a father who had found his children, and he would stop at nothing to protect them. The storm outside raged on, but inside the hospital room, Malik Carter felt a storm of his own. One made of guilt, love, and determination. He could see the exhaustion in Ayanna's eyes, the way her body sagged from carrying years of struggle alone. He couldn't take away the past, but he could damn sure change the present. He moved closer to the bed where Jordan lay pale and weak, tubes and wires surrounding his tiny frame. Malik lowered himself into the chair beside him, the expensive fabric of his tailored suit brushing against the sterile metal armrest. Yet for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a billionaire or a businessman. He felt like a man who had been robbed of fatherhood and had just been given the chance to claim it. As the night crept in, Malik didn't leave. He stayed in that chair, watching the slow rise and fall of his son's chests, listening to every beep of the monitors, like it was tethered to his own heartbeat. Ayanna had fallen asleep, slumped against the bed, one hand still clutching Jalen's tiny fingers, her body too worn down to keep fighting the exhaustion. Malik pulled off his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders, his sleeves rolled up, his face, tired but unyielding. When the boys stirred in the early hours of the morning, Malik was still there. Yalon opened his eyes first, squinting curiously at the stranger in the chair. His voice was soft and raspy. "Mum, did you sleep here?" Ayanna blinked awake, her eyes widening when she saw Malik still seated. She whispered, almost disbelieving, "You stayed." Malik's voice was steady. "I couldn't leave. Not now." Jalen's gaze shifted toward him, studying the man who carried the same features he saw in his own reflection. "Who's that?" he asked innocently. Malik leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle. "I'm a friend of your mum's." Yalon tilted his head, his little brow furrowed. "You look kinda like me." For the first time in days, Ayanna let out the smallest breath of a laugh, one mixed with nerves and disbelief. Malik's lips curved faintly, his heart tightening at the child's words. "I get that a lot," he said softly. On the other bed, Jordan stirred, weaker, paler, his voice so faint it almost wasn't there. "Mummy, is that man staying?" Ayanna looked at Malik, her heart pounding. She wanted to protect them, to shield them, but something inside her gave way. She answered with a quiet strength, "Yes, he's going to help us." Malik moved closer, picking up the spoon from the hospital tray. He held it carefully, his large hand trembling slightly as he offered it toward Jordan. "Want to try a bite?" Jordan hesitated, his lips parting slowly before he accepted the spoonful of applesauce. Malik's chest swelled with something fierce and unfamiliar as he smiled at his son, the boy who had just let him in. The moment was small, quiet, but for Malik it was monumental. It was the first step into a role he should have been living all along. He watched Ayanna from the corner of his eye, the tension in her shoulders loosening ever so slightly as she saw the connection forming. She whispered under her breath, "He loves story time." Malik looked at her and nodded. "What's his favorite?" "Anything about space, rockets, stars," Ayanna replied, her voice carrying a tired fondness. "He says he wants to be an astronaut." Later that day, Malik returned, not with business calls or contracts, but with books and a small galaxy projector he had bought at the hospital gift shop. When he turned it on, the room glowed with soft blue lights that danced across the ceiling, like constellations. Jordan and Jalen's faces lit up in wonder, their giggles filling the room for the first time in days. Malik sat at their bedside reading aloud about stars and galaxies, his deep voice filling every corner of the room. Ayanna stood quietly in the shadows watching him. She had seen Malik in boardrooms, commanding rooms full of powerful men, but she had never seen him like this. His eyes were soft, his hands steady, his words deliberate, as though each one mattered more than anything else. For the first time in years, she felt something shift in her chest. Something fragile and dangerous. Hope. That night, as the boys drifted to sleep under the glow of artificial stars, Malik kept reading. his voice steady, even as his heart ached. And when silence finally filled the room, he looked at Ayana with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I lost you once," he said softly. "I won't lose them too." The next morning, sunlight spilled weakly through the narrow hospital windows but brought little warmth to the sterile room. Malik had not left. He had sat in the same chair all night, watching his son's fragile breathing, his body still, his heart restless. Ayana stirred first, her back aching from sleeping in an awkward position beside Jalen's bed. She blinked and saw him still there, his suit jacket draped over the chair arm, his sleeves rolled up, his hair slightly disheveled in a way she had never seen before. Her voice was quiet, almost uncertain. "You stayed." Malik handed her a cup of hospital coffee, his eyes steady. "It's terrible, but it's all I could find." She took it without speaking, staring down into the dark liquid. "You don't have to pretend to care, Malik. This isn't your burden." His jaw clenched. "That's where you're wrong. I should have known. I should have found you. I should have been here." Ayana shook her head. "You were getting married. You had your whole life planned. I didn't want to interrupt that with a scandal." Malik's eyes darkened as he spoke, flatly. "That marriage lasted 6 months. My father's company was saved, but the cost was everything else. I spent years looking for you." Her throat tightened as she turned away, hiding the tears that threatened to fall. "I never wanted pity, Malik. I wanted to survive." He stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "Then let me help you now. Let me be here." Ayana's eyes flickered toward the boys, her heart torn between fear and longing. "Help means more hospitals, more bills, more heartbreak if we lose him." Malik's gaze didn't waver. "I'm not afraid of heartbreak anymore. I'm afraid of regret." Later that day, the twins woke. Yalan opened his eyes first, blinking. At the light, his voice was hoarse but curious. "Mum, did you sleep here?" Ayana nodded, smoothing his hair gently. Jalen's eyes shifted to Malik, who stood nearby holding a tray with applesauce and juice. "Who's that?" Malik's lips curved into a small smile. "Hi, I'm a friend of your mum's." Yalan tilted his head, studying him. "You look kind of like me." Malik let out a soft laugh. "I get that a lot." On the other bed, Jordan stirred weakly, his voice barely audible. "Mummy, is that man staying?" Ayana looked at Malik, her heart beating fast. For a moment she hesitated, then she answered firmly, "Yes. He's going to help us." Malik sat beside Jordan, carefully holding the spoon of applesauce toward him. "Want to try a bite?" Jordan hesitated, but then opened his mouth. Malik smiled as the boy ate, his chest tightening with an overwhelming tenderness he couldn't explain. That evening, as the nurse adjusted Jordan's medication, Ayana whispered softly, "He loves story time." Malik leaned closer. "What's his favorite?" "Anything about space, rockets, stars. He says he wants to be an astronaut." That night, Malik returned carrying 3 books and a small galaxy projector he had bought at the hospital gift shop. When he turned it on, soft blue lights danced across the ceiling like constellations, and for the first time in days, the boys' faces lit up with joy. Malik read aloud with deliberate care, his voice deep and calming as if each word was a promise. Ayana watched from the corner, her arms folded, her chest tightening as she saw the way her sons leaned toward him, the way they trusted him without hesitation. The sadness of the room seemed to dissolve under the glow of stars, replaced by the quiet sound of a father's voice telling his children about the universe. Hours later, when the boys finally drifted to sleep, Ayana found Malik in the hospital chapel, sitting alone. She walked in and sat quietly beside him, her fingers clasped tightly in her lap. For a long time neither of them spoke. Finally she whispered, "They're getting attached." "I know," Malik said quietly, his voice heavy. "So am I. You said you weren't afraid of heartbreak. I'm not. But I am afraid of not being in their lives. I'm afraid of being a stranger again." Ayana looked at the cross on the wall, her throat tight. "You're not a stranger. Not anymore." Malik reached for her hand, his thumb brushing lightly across her palm. I never stopped loving you. Her chest tightened, her eyes burning as she tried to stay composed. You're only saying that because you feel guilty. He leaned closer, his voice firm. I'm saying that because it's true. I lost you once, Ayana. I won't let it happen again. She looked away, tears brimming. Just promise me, no matter what happens with Jordan. Malik squeezed her hand, his voice steady. I'm not going anywhere. For the first time in 7 years, Ayana didn't pull her hand away. In that quiet chapel, with only the soft hum of fluorescent lights above them, something began to change. The following evening, the air outside had turned crisp with the first hints of fall, but inside the hospital room, the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken words. Jordan and Yalan were asleep, their small bodies curled under blankets. The galaxy projector still painting stars across the ceiling. Ayana sat by the window, staring out into the dim hallway, her coffee cup cold in her hands. Malik returned from a phone call, his expression unreadable, and when she finally looked at him, her heart sank at the tension in his eyes. I did something, he said, his voice low and steady. Something I should have done a long time ago. Ayana straightened, her chest tightening. What did you do, Malik? He pulled an envelope from his coat pocket, his hand trembling slightly. I had their DNA tested. Her breath caught, anger flashing across her face. You what? I had to know, he said, stepping closer, his voice firm. Ayana's hands shook as she tore the envelope open. She scanned the words, the numbers, the truth in black and white that left no room for doubt. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. Her knees weakened and she sank into the chair, her voice breaking. You didn't trust me. I needed certainty, Malik said, kneeling in front of her. His eyes burned into hers. I needed to know they were mine. And now that I do, nothing else matters. Her tears spilled as she whispered, I never lied to you. I know that now, he said gently, taking her hand. Ayana, these are my sons. I lost them for 7 years, but I will not lose them again. She pulled her hand away, her voice sharp with pain. You say that now, but what happens when your life gets complicated again? What happens when your board of directors finds out you have 2 children with a woman who used to scrub your office floors? Malik didn't flinch. His jaw was set, his voice steady. Then I remind them that I don't work for them. They work for me. Ayana let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. You think it's that simple? You think love can fix everything? No, Malik replied, standing tall, his eyes unwavering. But I think love is the only reason to fight. For anything at all. He walked to Jordan's bedside, his gaze softening as he brushed a hand gently over the boy's small knuckles. Jordan stirred faintly but didn't wake, and Malik felt his chest crack open with emotion. Behind him, Ayana watched silently, her heart twisting in conflict. Later that night, Jordan grew restless, tossing and turning as Ayana leaned close to soothe him. Her whispers calmed him, but then, without opening his eyes, his voice broke through the stillness. I like him, Mummy. He feels safe. Ayana froze, her throat tightening, her hand brushing back his hair. I know, sweetheart. He's your dad. Jordan blinked slowly, his weak voice asking, like really? She nodded, her heart breaking, like really? He was quiet for a moment before asking the question she feared most. Why wasn't he here before? Ayana's tears slid down her cheek. Because I made a mistake. I thought it was better to keep you safe from a complicated world. Did he not want us? Jordan whispered, her chest ached as she pulled him closer. No, baby, he just didn't. No. Jordan's lip quivered as he whispered, I want him to stay. Ayana kissed his forehead, whispering back, me too. The next morning, Malik returned with breakfast from a bakery down the street. He laid out croissants and juice, cutting apple slices into stars. Yalan laughed at his clumsy attempts to pronounce the French names on the box, while Jordan reached for the food without hesitation, smiling faintly for the first time in weeks. The boys giggled, and Ayana, despite herself, couldn't help but smile to Dot. After breakfast, Malik pulled her aside into the hallway, his voice steady but soft. There's something I want to show you. He handed her his phone, An email thread pulled up. She read quickly, her eyes widening. "What is this?" "A trust fund for Jordan and Yolan," he explained. "Set up in their names for medical care, education, anything they need." Her voice caught as she looked at him in disbelief. "Malik, this is too much." "No, it isn't," he said firmly. "It's nothing compared to what they deserve." Her hands trembled as she looked away, overwhelmed. "You're doing all this, and I don't even know if Jordan will make it." Malik touched her arm gently, his eyes steady. "That's exactly why I'm doing it. So he doesn't have to fight alone. So you don't have to fight alone." For the first time in days she met his gaze and didn't look away. In his eyes, she didn't see a billionaire or a businessman. She saw a father. She saw the man she once loved. And for the first time in 7 years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe he was here to stay. Before the sun had even risen, the headlines were everywhere. Billionaire tech mogul Malik Carter secretly fathered twins with a former maid. Photos of Malik carrying Jordan down the hospital hallway and Ayana sitting by Jalen's bedside splashed across gossip, blogs, and business outlets alike. By midday, the media circus had arrived, reporters crowding the hospital entrance. Cameras flashing, voices shouting questions that echoed through the sterile halls. Inside room 3C, Ayana sat stiff in the chair. Her hands clenched in her lap, her eyes locked on the muted television where the story looped again and again. She didn't need sound to feel the judgment. Malik stormed in, his expression dark, his phone pressed to his ear as his voice snapped through clenched teeth. "I don't care how it got out, shut it down. Pull every PR string we have." Ayana stood slowly, her voice sharp and trembling. "You said this wouldn't happen." "I know," he shot back, lowering the phone. "I'm handling it." Her eyes burned as anger spilled from her chest. "Handle it, Malik, because right now I'm being called a gold digger by people who don't know me. My sons are being dragged through the mud." A nurse's phone had a headline open, and Yolan saw it. "He asked me if being sick makes him bad." Malik's jaw locked tight as he ended the call with a snap. "I'll fix this. I'll hold a press conference." Ayana shook her head, her voice rising with fear. "That will only make it worse. You don't understand. I have lived in the shadows for years just to protect them. And now, because you want to play Father of the Year, we are front page news." The boys were in the other room with a nurse, but the walls of the hospital felt thin, every word pressing against them. Malik's voice dropped, heavy and raw. "This isn't about image. It's about truth. They are my sons. They deserve to be acknowledged." Ayana's voice cracked as tears welled in her eyes. "Not like this." Malik reached for her hand. But she stepped back. Her voice was quieter now, but every word cut deep. "The board is going to turn on you, isn't it? The investors, the partners." He hesitated for the first time, the weight of the corporate world pressing against his chest. "Some already have." Her shoulders sagged as she whispered, "And you'd give all that up?" His answer came without hesitation, in a heartbeat, but before the words could settle, another storm rolled in. That evening, Jordan's condition worsened, his breathing grew shallow, the machines around him beeping faster, alarms filling the room. Doctors rushed in, their voices urgent, their hands moving quickly, as Ayana was ushered out into the hallway. Malik was right behind her, his arms wrapping around her as she broke down against his chest. "I can't lose him," she sobbed, her voice raw. "I can't do this again." Malik held her tighter, his own chest shaking with fear he refused to voice. "We're not losing him. Do you hear me? We're not." Hours passed like years until finally, the doctor returned, his face serious. "We stabilized him, but it's temporary. He needs the transplant soon." Ayana's knees nearly gave out as she closed her eyes. Malik's voice cut through, steady and fierce. "What do we need to do?" "We'll test for matches immediately," the doctor explained. "But be prepared for difficult conversations." Malik turned to Ayana, determination blazing in his eyes. "I'll be tested first." She tried to protest, her voice breaking. "You've already done enough." His voice rose, filled with a pain that had been building for years. It will never be enough. Don't you get it? I was gone for 7 years. I didn't hold them when they took their first steps. I didn't teach them how to ride bikes or sing lullabies when they were scared. I have so much to make up for. Her tears spilled over as she whispered, "And what if you're not a match?" Malik's jaw clenched as his answer came like steel. "Then I'll find someone who is. I'll buy the hospital if I have to." Ayana let out a hollow laugh, shaking her head through her tears. "You still think money can fix everything?" His eyes softened as he stepped closer, his voice low but unshakable. "No, but I know love can, and I know I love them. And I know I love you." Her breath caught, her heart twisting as she whispered, "Don't say that unless you mean it." Malik's gaze held hers, steady, unflinching. "I mean every word." The morning sun rose weakly over Atlanta, but inside the hospital, the weight of fear pressed down on everything. Jordan's breathing had grown shallow again, his chest heaving with effort, as machines beeped frantically around him. Nurses rushed in and out of the room, their voices urgent, their hands moving quickly. While Ayana stood frozen near the wall, her face pale with terror, Malik's heart pounded as he tried to steady himself. Watching his son's fragile body fight against a sickness that refused to let go. When the doctors finally ushered them out into the hallway, Ayana broke down, her hands covering her face as sobs ripped through her body. Malik wrapped his arms around her, pulling her tight against his chest, his voice rough with desperation. "He's going to be okay, do you hear me? We're not losing him." She shook her head, her tears soaking into his shirt. "I can't lose him, Malik. I can't bury my child. I can't do this alone." "You're not alone," Malik said fiercely, his voice echoing down the corridor. "Not anymore, not ever." Hours passed before the doctor returned, his face lined with fatigue. "We managed to stabilize him again, but this is only temporary. The transplant needs to happen soon or we'll lose him." Ayana closed her eyes as her body trembled, but Malik stepped forward, his voice sharp and unyielding. "Then test me, I'll be the donor." The doctor nodded and hurried away while Ayana turned to Malik, her voice breaking. "You've already given so much. You don't have to do this." Malik's eyes burned with intensity as he snapped back. "It will never be enough. Don't you understand? I missed everything. I wasn't there when they took their first steps, when they said their first words. I wasn't there when they were scared at night, or when they laughed for the first time. I lost all of that. This is my chance to give something back, to fight for them the way I should have, from the start." Ayana's tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "And what if you're not a match?" Malik stepped closer until his voice was almost a growl, filled with both love and rage at the thought of losing his son. "Then I'll find someone who is. I'll move heaven and earth if I have to. I'll buy the hospital, the donor registry, whatever it takes. But I will not stand here and watch him slip away. Not while I'm breathing." Ayana shook her head, letting out a bitter laugh through her tears. "You still think money can fix everything?" Malik cupped her face gently, forcing her to meet his eyes. His voice softened, but every word was soaked in truth. "No, money doesn't fix this, but love can, and I love them more than I've ever loved anything in this world. And Ayana, I love you." Her lips parted, her voice catching in her throat. "Don't say that unless you mean it." His hands trembled slightly as he held her face steady, his eyes never leaving hers. "I mean every word. I loved you then, I love you now, and I will love you until my last breath. And I will fight for our sons until they have a future you don't have to fear." In that moment, Ayana felt her walls crumbling, the pain of the past colliding with the truth standing before her. For the first time in years, she let herself believe that maybe she wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. Malik Carter wasn't just a man from her past. He was a father, a protector, a man who would not back down. And as the machines beeped faintly from behind the door where their son fought for his life, both of them knew that the breaking point had arrived. Everything from this moment forward would be a fight for survival, for family, and for love. The next day, the storm outside the hospital seemed to mirror the storm inside Malik's heart. The media frenzy had reached his corporate world, investors whispering about scandals, the board questioning his leadership. But Malik Carter no longer cared about image or empire. His only focus was the two boys fighting for their lives upstairs. When he walked into the boardroom later that morning, a room full of executives in expensive suits sat waiting for him. Their eyes were sharp, their voices filled with accusation. One of them spoke first, his tone cold. "Your actions have damaged our image. The company is bleeding confidence." Malik's gaze swept the room, unflinching. "Then let me make this very clear. Those boys are my sons. I am proud of them, and if this company cannot stand by a man who chooses his children over a polished headline, then maybe this company does not deserve me." The room fell silent, nervous glances exchanged between men who had once believed they controlled him. Malik continued, his voice steady and commanding. "My name built this empire. I can walk away from it today, if that's what it takes to be the father I should have been years ago." Before they could respond, he turned and walked out, leaving the board stunned in his wake. Back at the hospital, Ayanna received a call from an unfamiliar number. She hesitated before answering. "Miss Brooks, this is Lisa Thompson from the Carter Foundation. We wanted to inform you that a new pediatric wing is being opened in your son's name. Every child with a similar diagnosis will receive free care. Your son's case is already covered." Ayanna's voice caught as she listened, tears filling her eyes. She hung up and found Malik speaking quietly with a nurse down the hallway. She stood silently until he turned and saw her. "You never stop, do you?" she whispered. "Not when it comes to them," he answered simply. She studied him for a long moment, her voice softening. "You really would give up everything?" "Already have," he said. "All that's left is to earn their future." Her chest tightened as she stepped closer. "I was wrong. I thought loving you would cost me everything. But maybe not loving you was the real price." Malik reached for her hand, his eyes searching hers. "So what now?" She nodded slowly, her voice steady. "Now we fight together." From that moment, Malik threw himself into the battle. He completed his own donor screening at dawn, his nerves raw as he waited for results. When the doctor finally returned, Malik's breath stalled. "You're not a match," the doctor said gently. Malik's jaw clenched, his chest burning, but he didn't break. "Then find someone who is. Activate the donor registry. Search every hospital within 300 miles. I want the top transplant researchers here now. If there's a match out there, I'll bring them in myself." For 2 days, Malik barely slept. He coordinated calls, contacted hospitals, reached out to donor networks, even offered his private jet to fly potential matches across the country. And whenever he wasn't on the phone, he was at Jordan's bedside, holding his tiny hand, humming lullabies he hadn't realized he remembered. Late on the third night, Ayanna found him in the hospital chapel. Not seated this time, but on his knees, his hands clenched tightly, his forehead pressed against the bench as his voice trembled in prayer. "Just give me time. Give me one more chance to protect what I couldn't before." Ayanna didn't interrupt. She sat quietly beside him, placing her hand gently over his. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was shared, a weight carried together. At dawn, a nurse entered the room with urgency in her voice. "We found a match. The donor lives 2 hours away and has already agreed to the transplant." Malik stood immediately, his heart racing, his voice fierce. "Then make it happen. Whatever it takes, make it happen." Within hours the preparations began. Jordan would have the surgery in less than 48 hours. Malik signed every paper, arranged for a secure medical team, and stood watch like a soldier preparing for war. When he finally told Jordan, the boy looked up weakly and asked, "Am I going to be okay?" Malik's voice broke, but he smiled, brushing his son's hand gently. "You're going to be amazing. You're going to fly so high, the stars won't be able to keep up with you." The morning of the surgery arrived far too quickly. The hospital corridors felt colder, quieter, as if the entire building was holding its breath. Inside the room, Jordan lay pale but calm, nurses preparing him for the operation, while Ayana paced the hallway, her hands trembling, her chest tight with fear. Malik stayed close to his son, steady and unshakable, his hand never leaving the small fingers that clung to his Jalen, confused and frightened, clung to Ayana's leg. "Where's Jordan going, Mummy?" She knelt and held him close, her voice soft. "He's going to get better, sweetheart. He's just going to sleep for a little while so the doctors can help him." "Will he be different after?" Yalon asked, his little eyes wide. Ayana hesitated, then kissed his cheek. "He'll be stronger." Malik walked over and gently lifted Yalon into his arms, holding him against his chest. His voice was steady, a promise wrapped in every word. "I'm going to stay with your brother every second, okay? And when he wakes up, we'll all be here together." Yalan looked up at him, his voice small. "You promise?" Malik nodded, his eyes fierce with determination. "I swear." The surgery began, and the hours that followed felt endless. Ayana and Malik sat in the waiting room side by side, their shoulders touching, their hands unconsciously intertwined. Neither spoke much, but their silence was heavy with prayer, fear, and love. Every tick of the clock was another weight pressing down on them, every footstep in the hallway a jolt of dread. Finally, the doors opened, and the surgeon entered, her face solemn but steady. "He's stable. The transplant was successful." I gasped as tears poured from her eyes. Malik exhaled so deeply his entire chest shook, his grip tightening around her hand. "Can we see him?" "He's being monitored in recovery," the doctor replied. When they finally entered the ICU, Jordan looked fragile but peaceful. His tiny body hooked up to machines but no longer fighting alone. Ayana sobbed quietly as she held one of his hands, while Malik held the other, both of them clinging to their son as if their combined strength could will him back to life. That night, Ayana stepped into the hallway where Malik stood by the window, staring out at the city lights that glittered against the dark sky. He turned when she approached, his face weary but filled with something deeper than exhaustion. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." He shook his head slowly. "I didn't do anything you wouldn't have done 10 times over." Her voice cracked as tears filled her eyes. "You don't get it. You weren't just fighting for your sons, you were fighting for me. For the part of me that I thought died when I walked away from you." Malik's eyes softened as he stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair gently behind her ear. "It never died, it just waited." She leaned into his touch, her body trembling as she whispered, "I'm scared." His forehead touched hers, his voice steady and low. "Me too. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." Their lips met in the quiet hallway, not rushed, not desperate, but steady. The kiss of two people who had been lost for too long and had finally found their way home. When they pulled apart, Ayana smiled faintly through her tears, a smile that carried the weight of years of pain but also the spark of hope. "So what now?" she whispered. Malik's voice was certain, unshakable. "Now we build something new." 2 weeks after the transplant, the hospital room looked different. The monitors were quieter, the lights softer, and the boys louder. Jordan sat upright in bed, wearing a cape Malik had ordered with the words, "Future astronauts" stitched in silver. Yolon was by the window with markers, drawing stars and moons on the glass, just like the ones from the galaxy projector. Ayana stood at the foot of the bed, laughing as Malik clumsily tried to braid her hair at Jalen's insistence. She peeked in the mirror and shook her head. "This doesn't look right." Malik grinned, his deep laugh filling the room. "It's a creative interpretation." For the first time in years, Ayana didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was living. Malik had done more than pay bills or sign papers. He had stayed through sleepless nights, read bedtime stories with a galaxy of stars above them, made French toast 3 times before getting it right, and learned every small thing that made their children smile. And somewhere along the way, Ayana stopped waiting for him to leave. She started believing he was here to stay. One crisp autumn morning, While the boys were in physical therapy, Malik took Ayana for a walk in the nearby park. They sat beneath a maple tree, its leaves turning gold and red, and Malik pulled a small box from his pocket. Ayana's breath caught, her voice soft. "Don't say it unless you're sure." "I'm not proposing," he said gently. He opened the box to reveal two simple brushed silver rings. "One for you, one for me. Not for show, not for headlines, not even for the boys, just for us. So that every morning we wake up, we remember we chose this. We chose each other." Tears filled Ayana's eyes as she slid the ring onto her finger, her heart swelling. "You never stop surprising me. I've had years of regret to learn from," Malik said, his voice low and certain. Back at the hospital, the staff had begun calling Jordan and Yolan the miracle twins. Nurses brought them treats, doctors lingered to hear their jokes. One afternoon, the chief pediatrician asked Ayana to help design a support program for single mothers, funded by Malik and named after the twins. For the first time, Ayana didn't hesitate. She said yes. The day they were released, Malik carried Jordan in his arms while Ayana held Jalen's hand, walking out into the sun as hospital staff cheered quietly. Instead of going to Malik's penthouse or back to Ayana's cramped apartment, Malik drove them to a house on the edge of the city. One with a garden, a porch swing, and a long gravel driveway. It had belonged to Ayana's late grandmother, and Malik had secretly tracked it down and bought it during Jordan's recovery. "Welcome home," he said, handing her the keys. Ayana's eyes filled with tears as the boys ran inside laughing. "This is too much," she whispered. "Not even close." Malik replied with a soft smile. The weeks that followed were filled with something. Ayana thought she had lost forever. Normalcy. Malik handled conference calls from the porch, joined school drop-offs, learned how to burn pancakes on Sunday mornings until the boys took over. Ayana returned to painting, filling the walls with color again. At night, they sat together around the table, sometimes eating meals too salty, sometimes perfect, but always together. One evening, after the boys had gone to bed, Malik and Ayana sat on the porch swing under a sky full of stars. She leaned her head against his shoulder, her voice quiet. "Remember when I told you I was scared of what loving you would cost me?" "Yes," he said softly. She smiled faintly. "It gave me everything." Malik kissed the top of her head, his hand wrapped around hers. "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure it never costs you again." The wind chimes danced gently in the night air, as their children's laughter echoed faintly through the house. The past was not forgotten, but it no longer defined them. What they had built was something new, something forged through pain but softened by forgiveness. Malik had once believed that success was measured in empires and legacies, but nothing compared to the sound of Jordan and Yolan laughing, or the sight of Ayana resting her head on his chest. And Ayana, who had once thought her strength came from enduring alone, realized real strength was letting someone stand beside her. Someone who would never turn away. As the stars glowed above them, Malik whispered, "I used to think home was a place you built. Now I know, it's a person who stays." Ayana leaned into him, her eyes closing, her heart finally at peace. And in that moment, with their children safe and their future theirs to shape, Malik and Ayana understood that what they had created was more than a reunion. It was redemption. A second chance at love, at family, at life. Not the kind of love that arrives with fireworks or grand gestures, but the kind that stays, the kind that fights through storms and chooses to remain. And for them, that was everything.